Don't catcall. Terrible. Terrible. Shanghai Watch Gang, the Watch Club Asia, the Horology Club, Red Bar Shanghai, Red Bar Singapore, Red Bar Korea, and of course, Watch Ho & Co. By a show of hands, how many of you in the audience belong to one or more of these collector groups that I just mentioned? Jackie, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, yes.
Obviously.
You missed your cue, buddy. You missed your cue. Okay, this should tell us everything we need to know about the state of watch collecting in the Asian Pacific region. And I'm about to introduce you all to just two of the many serious collectors that hail from this part of the world. The lovely Sumei Shum, with whom I had the pleasure to interview for Revolution magazine a couple of years back, is a former lawyer and yoga instructor hailing from Singapore and is a well-known collector of independent watch brands.
Thank you.
And Jackie Ho, who lives here in Hong Kong, is the founder of the aforementioned Watch Ho & Co. By the way, that's Watch Ho and Co.
Community.
Community and not company. He made
Correct.
that very clear to me. As well as a collector of both modern and vintage timepieces. Let's please give them both a round of applause. Before we get into the barbed questions, though, both of these fine folks are double wristing. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Sumei and do a wrist check. If you don't mind telling the folks here what exactly you're wearing, Sumei.
On my left wrist is the Bethune GMT, DB25 GMT Stradivarius. And on the right hand...
I heard the collective, like the ahs from the audience.
This is a great traveling watch, by the way. And on my right hand is FP Jean Resonance, what do you call it, a parking meter.
Right?
The
Yes.
parking meter. Yeah, okay, I hear him. And, again, we talked about it already, but I know what's on your wrist. Why don't you let them know what's on your wrist, Jackie?
On my left wrist, I have an early Daniel Roth skeleton two-faced tourbillon. And on my right wrist, I have the Audemars Piguet Cobra.
Do you want to, you mentioned to me the years of both of those timepieces. The Daniel Roth, what year is that from?
Daniel Roth is early 90s, and the Cobra is 70s.
It's wonderful. I love that we have just two different worlds for the most part. Jackie, I am going to start with you since I'm already on the topic of the watch community in Asia Pacific region. With collector groups seemingly plentiful as it is and almost popping up on the daily, I know at least in the United States, why did you feel the need to start another, it's about a year ago, right? 2023 is when you started your group?
Yeah, May 2023, we established the club.
What is it that you wanted to offer members that would join that community that you felt they maybe were not getting from other collector groups in the region?
I think we started during COVID, I organized a lot of events myself, just under Jackie, just under Watch Ho, my IG handle. And then through that we felt, myself, Clarence, and others, that we should set up a watch club that was fun, that was inclusive, and that didn't take ourselves too seriously. And that wasn't just all about the mechanics, the movement, the technical side of watchmaking. We're more about the people, we're more about the community, we're all about networking and finding out about the people behind the watches. So I've heard a lot of feedback from people about our club, and the difference is that we are fun. We're not boring, we're not geeky, it's a welcoming atmosphere. We put the people first. We make sure everyone has a good time. We make sure everyone's included. And also we make sure that everyone from all types of collectors, down from micro brands to moderns to indies to vintages, all the spectrum are welcome, and not just the very expensive watches or the hype watches or the commercial watches. So that's what we set out to do. And I think we are getting there. I wouldn't say we're there, but like the proof is in the pudding. We have hosted or co-hosted 70 plus events.
Wow, in over a year.
In over a year.
How many members would you say you're at this point?
About 250, 300.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's impressive. That's
Yeah,
incredible.
and the highlight being our 1 year anniversary in May, where we were very fortunate to invite Vianney Halter, Ferdinand Bertud, and also Chinese independent watchmaker Logan Quan Rao to a panel which I moderated, and we had it in the American Club, and we had about 150 people there. A lot of people flew in from Asia, and also as far as Dubai and Kazakhstan too.
Wow.
And more recently, our summer GDG was sponsored by Chapard, and we had it in the beautiful Magistracy in Daegun, and that was a very big deal for us because of the venue too, because it used to be the former Supreme Court of Hong Kong, so it had a lot of history there, and also for Chapard, another independent brand, to sponsor us, to believe in us, and to want to partner with us too, and that's very really important to us. And
That's incredible. So it's a no judgment zone, is what you're saying.
yeah, absolutely.
I
yeah.
love that. You can
Yeah.
roll in with a G-Shock and
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what
everybody's
it's all
having
about.
just as much-
At the end of the day, I always say it's like, and I borrowed this term from someone, not someone actually, from a friend or a couple of friends, Justin and Omar. It's like, we collect people. It's not just we collect watches, but we collect people. And I cherish the relationships and the friends and the good friends, and a lot of them are here more than I do the watches.
I love that. That's fantastic. And Sumei, I know that you're also a member of, one, you raised your hand, but two, because I follow you on Instagram, I know that you're also a member of a handful of watch collector groups. What was your process of going about finding those groups, or did they know of you and they sought you out? They were looking for you. Like, how do you go, okay, I'm going to be a member of this group, this group, this group, maybe not this group, whatever. What's the process for someone like you and what you're interested in?
I think it's rather organic. I don't go out looking for clubs, neither do clubs come looking for me. You go out for social events or watch events, and then you meet people and you mingle, and then when you introduce yourself to fellow collectors and you find out they're from a particular club, then you ask them about it, and they either invite you or you like, hey, can I join your club? So it's something like that, quite organic.
Would you ever get any blowback? And I'm going to say this because we're not there yet, I think, as women in this community. We're getting there, but would you ever get any blowback, at least when you first started collecting, from guys who were like, this is kind of like a guys group? Like, did you find that it was very welcoming being a woman independent watch collector? And again, when I interviewed you for that article, that was a couple years ago. It was, seeing somebody like you, it blew my mind to see and to hear about the watches that you own. So I'm wondering if, like, at the beginning, were you accepted into the world?
I've not been a very sociable watch collector. It's only been recent, and then because of the interviews and the publications about my watch collecting journey, people recognize me. Tim also interviewed me. People recognize me, but it's been a bit harder because they either view you as, oh, you've got a few indie watches, or you are a strange person amongst the men collectors. But once they get to know you and realize that you are the same like them, you appreciate the same type of watches, mechanical watches mostly, and sometimes quartz, and you can talk about watches and different brands, then they think, okay, you're no different from them. So it's been a lot easier than most people think, and I'm unusual as well because I'm female, so they tend to want to know how I go about collecting my watches and what attracts me to what is considered men's watches right now, but hopefully no longer labeled as such in these current times.
Do they still consider you a little bit of an anomaly?
I don't think so anymore.
Okay, good.
I hope not.
I noticed, like, I see you, there's at least one collector group that you guys go on trips together, and, like, there's a super tight community that, of these folks. Can you tell us maybe a little bit more about, like, who comes up with the idea of, like, okay, hey, we're going to do this?
Well, actually, I started I heard about all these trips, and I've not been fortunate to join one formal one, but I did a manufacturer visit last year by myself and my partner. We visited 10 manufacturers, and I organized everything myself, although I had to reach out to friends to put me into contact with some of them because I didn't know some of the manufacturers. And that was really wonderful. When I came back, all my friends who have not gone on these such trips, they asked, was it easy to plan? And I said, actually, it's quite easy. For independent watch brands, you can reach out to them directly, and they're very, very welcoming to invite you to their place, to show their manufacture, and basically host you. Then this year when I went to Watches and Wonders, I happened to go with a much younger group, and they were like, hey, instead of going to the Palexpo, let's visit Haldeman, which is like, I've been wanting to go there. Roman Gautier, which was my second visit. So a few different places, and I appreciated that I was included as one of them.
I love that. Jackie, I'm going to get back to you because you, when I said to you, I actually know Sumei, but I don't really know you and know a lot about you. Can you kind of give me the quick and dirty on who Jackie is? You talked about your beginning journey and your father and the fact that I believe you said he had a watch shop. Can you kind of briefly give us an idea of, because this is called like the evolution of a collector. So you're from here, you're from Hong Kong, your dad had a watch shop. How did what was the line that brought you from point A to point B?
So I actually didn't realize my dad was a watchmaker. He had a shop in Toguawan in the 70s until I asked my mom for the birth cert. And on the old birth cert, it's the old English style birth cert, and it had the father and the mother's job there. So then my dad was listed down as a watchmaker. So then that's how I knew my dad was I didn't even know back then. So then I asked my mom, then I asked my dad, and so on began there. But it wasn't, I was still very young, and I wasn't really into watches then. So when I started getting into watches kind of seriously was about 10 years ago. When I first bought my first luxury Swiss watch, I would say, was a Panerai GMT ceramic 441. And then it was for something to mark a milestone at work, where there was a promotion or there was a nice bonus. And then I felt that, okay, now I have a sporty watch, I should get something to go with my suit. And then I went for a Patek Calatrava. Then I realized I shouldn't be rocking that.
So Patek was your second watch?
Yeah. So I shouldn't have.
brother.
It was a nice bonus. It was a nice bonus at the time. So then I realized I shouldn't be rocking a Patek.
What happened to like Flick Flacks? Don't people usually start with like, you start small,
G-Shock swatch.
you move up to Seiko. Come on.
Yeah, when I go in, I go all in deep kind of thing. So then I realized I shouldn't be rocking a Patek at work, especially during meetings with my boss and stuff. And so.
So you got a Richard Mille, right? Yeah, right. This is how, right. We know.
No, so then I toned it down a little bit and went for a two-tone Yachtmaster. I got a AP Royal Oak when then was more or less retail or under retail, and then I got very, very deep into vintage Rolex then. Vintage Rolex, many years I collected, and the jewel of my collection back then was a 6263 big red silver dial, and it was a full set. And I really loved that watch, but I had to sell it, is because one night I was out and I didn't intend to go drinking that night, but it ended up like that, and I ended up passed out in a park in Mongkok, of all the places to be. But fortunately, not many people recognized the watch, and it was fine. But I scraped the plexiglass on it, but everything else was still there. And from then on, I was just worried. I was like, okay, it's such an expensive watch. It's such a rare watch. I cannot be wearing this out. And if I cannot be wearing it, I'm not enjoying it.
Right.
So then I eventually had to sell it. And then during COVID, then when a lot of us had were obviously locked down and had a lot of time on our hands, did a lot of research, did a lot of reading, consumed a lot of social media as well, and also the fact that during then there was that the market was at the top, so nothing was at retail, right? So whereas independents then, like you mentioned, and Sumei mentioned, that when you DM them or communicate with them, you're most likely talking with someone in the brand, whether it's the watchmaker, the CEO, or someone senior. So you build that connection, you build that rapport, and that's when I first fell in love with Daniel Roth, and I did a lot of reading into him, and he's the godfather of indies. He left Breguet. DNA is still there, and he he started his namesake brand, Daniel Roth, in 1989. Back then, he came up with a double ellipse case, which was still iconic. And anyone that knows watches that see this case, you know it's Daniel Roth. And to have the bravery and the vision and the foresight to design something like this, so timeless that even till now, when you're wearing it, it's still beautiful on the wrist.
Sure.
And I think he's very, very underrated as a watchmaker because he led the way, he led the path. He didn't have anyone to lean on. There was no other indies there whatsoever. Like, you know, there was, you know, Dufour was still coming up then, and actually Daniel Roth brought in Dufour to help him build the perpetual calendar, one of his models. So that was my first love in indies, and then
That's a really interesting evolution. And I want to probably stop you there because I want to get to Sumei and sort of let's talk about yours. Again, I know your evolution because of the article, which by the way, if anybody's here and wants to read the full article, it is still up on Revolution's website. You're welcome, Wei, for the extra clicks. So can you tell us exactly, tell the crew exactly how you got into watch collecting and particularly independent watch collecting? You know, again, being in this region, the independents are really popular and really hot. And I mean, there's a huge market here for that. But what got you interested?
Well, into watches, as I didn't start like him. I had swatches, many, they're still in my box, but no battery, I mean, run out of battery. I collected G-Shocks, baby G-Shocks at that time. And then Tag Heuers for diving, and I mentioned to you, I used to love clicking on the dial of the Tag Heuer, and you just, it's quite addictive, you know, you just click, 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 and it was, I enjoyed it then.
It was like an early fidget spinner.
Yeah,
just like
for fidgeting.
Kept you
yes,
occupied.
Yes, true. Fast forward, I started working as a lawyer, and then of course, you know, you've got your paycheck and everything. And there was an advert, I remember, in the papers featuring Lange 1 and the FP Jeune Octa Reserve de Marche. And I looked at both these dials. They were different because they don't have center seconds, I mean center hands. One was one dial on the side, FP Jeune on the right side, Lange 1 on the left side. And I said, wow, this is really interesting for a watch dial. It was unusual at that point of time, or at least I hadn't seen any other watches like this. So I thought, okay, this is quite interesting. I should consider buying this. So I went to Zermatt, walked into a boutique and looked at both watches. And the FP Jeune watch won because it was salmon dial and very beautiful. And I walked out with it.
You walked out with it.
Yeah, I bought it. It was like major expensive.
Only in Zermatt.
It was major expensive. It was like my savings for like 1-2 years to be able to get that watch. But I did love it. It was heavy because it was platinum. Then I went down the rabbit hole because you start looking at watches in a different light. There were to me, no watch media at that time. So I really didn't know anything about mechanics or mechanisms of the watches. I just looked at aesthetics and how it looked on my wrist. And, oh, this looks nice to wear for dinner.
And you didn't have the Instagram feeds and everything that exists today.
No, not at all.
That we gawk constantly and scroll.
No, not at all.
So this was just you walking into random boutiques for the most part.
Kind of.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then tell us the next one.
Well, Panerai, because that was the rage in 2007, 2008. Big watches, they were big for my wrist, 44 mm. But, you know, women can wear all kinds of watches, right?
I don't know. Suzanne Wong, I think, has a Panerai.
Well, I mean, you can wear lots of watches, and people don't look. I mean, they look at you, but they think, oh, okay, it's just she's trying to be fashionable. So we got away with all these things. Then I started teaching yoga, and yoga, if anyone knows, it's non-attachment. So I'm like, oh, expensive watches put aside. No watches when I'm teaching. And I stopped my collecting, or at least I stopped my horological journey for a long while until 2015, 2016. Then I got back into it because I started reading articles, and Hodinkee was out at that time. Fratello, Monochrome, Quill and Pad, all these resources. And then it's like a rabbit hole, right? You read it and you're like thinking, oh my God, I don't know a lot of things and I need to find out more. So that kind of revived my interest in watches.
I love that. That's fantastic. Well, I want to throw a stat out here that Jackie and I had actually mentioned earlier. Sorry. Okay, and I'm only going to take 2023 numbers because the 2024 numbers aren't out. But according to the Federation of the Swiss Watch Industry, FH, Asia, and that's all of Asia now, combined, accounted for almost half, 49% of Swiss watch exports. I find that astonishing living in America. I'm like, that's crazy because if you take the entirety of Swiss watch exports for both North and South America, it's only 19%, and that was for 2023. Now, obviously, we're still coming out of post-pandemic era, and it's still not exactly where they want to be, but it's still incredible numbers, compared to where we were in 2020, 2021. Obviously, it's a long road to recovery, but both of you, I want to ask you both this. Where do you see is the biggest shift in interest in watches, both Swiss-made as well as those made in Germany and Japan and even China now, in this region? Are the numbers, because, like you mentioned, there are more publications, there are more Instagram feeds, are the numbers raising because there are more women interested in watches, or because Gen Z is starting to pay attention? I mean, Jackie, I'll probably start with you on this because you have this watch collector group. Are you seeing younger people? You mentioned I won't mention your age, but you mentioned not being the age I thought you were, which was much younger than I thought. I mean, I was like, this guy's in his 20s. But are you seeing folks in your community? Like, is there a real impact on Gen Z? And do you think that that's part of the reason we're seeing these numbers come out of Asia?
Yeah, we have a lot of very young collectors in our group. I think the passion for horology in general in the last couple of years has exploded. Just wearing a wristwatch is cool again, right? Obviously, you had the hype and people flipping watches and they were going for multiples of retail. That helped it too, but now we have the lull back again. There's still plenty of watches, still plenty of people wearing watches, right? We've multiple watch clubs, we've all these events going around around the world. And so I would say the shift towards indies and also towards Chinese-made watches is definitely very apparent, especially Chinese-made watches, the value proposition there, and also the feel-good story behind it too, and also to support something that's very local to us, because we're here in Hong Kong, we're a local watch club, and with local watch collectors, or even the expats that are living here, will be gravitated towards that. So, like, our good friend here, Robin from Atelier Wen, which is very, very popular now. And then I seen a friend of ours, James, who wore Chingan. And then you have, Logan Kwan Rao, who we invited to our 1-year anniversary. And then we have Zentier, who Morton designed, who's in our club as well.
So do you think the branch you just mentioned, do you think there really is like a 20-something, who lives in this region, lives in Hong Kong, is completely just turned on by that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's the numbers don't lie, the sales don't lie either.
Right.
Like Atelier Wen was sold out in X amount of minutes, and so on, and all these brands too. It's not like they're desperate for. It's the other way around. People are desperate to get those kind of watches, and I think with the way the economy is now and the market is now, and those types of watches are a great value proposition because they're so affordable. So you don't need to think twice about buying them because they're fun, they're affordable, and also, it literally doesn't break the bank. So it's like, yeah, it resonates with me. I like this particular brand. I like the design about it. I like the story behind it, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, click, buy, done.
Sumei, I'm going to ask you the same thing. Like, what do you think right now in the Asia-Pacific market is causing a shift and creating a bigger impact than maybe there was before? As mentioned, youth, it's, gender, anything along those lines, something I'm missing?
I tend to be a bit cynical about it. I think when the pandemic happened and, people had a lot of disposable cash and there was nothing else to do but shop online, and you see Instagram posts showing watches, it became a hype thing and people were buying to actually make money out of it. I still see that happening. People are trying to discover who's the next big watchmaker so that you can land it and maybe make some bucks out of it in the later years. But having said that, with Instagram and with the watch communities and watch events where you get to know most watch brands, there is more recognition that that there is value to the watch, not in terms of numbers, but in terms of variety, in terms of creativity, in terms of it being art on your wrist as well. So I guess all that combination of factors tend to or help people appreciate or look at watches in a different light, as opposed to just using it as to tell time. I actually don't use my watch very much to tell time. Sometimes only.
You look at your phone.
Yes, you know, I'm sure most of you feel the same way. You don't look at your watches to read time. You use your phone. But the watch is it's a personification of yourself as well. If you feel like you want to look good wearing watches, then you do buy watches to wear them. I don't know whether that's addressing the point you wanted to.
No, absolutely, 100%. Jackie, I want to go back to you really quickly on the vintage side. It's funny because when I came up with these questions, and I joked about it just a few minutes ago, I geared them toward, you're a young guy, like you know, why did you get interested in vintage timepieces? And then when we talked about your age, I was like, oh God, I'm gonna have to rephrase those questions out.
I'm not that old.
But I am still I'm gonna go back on that, and I know you kind of briefly touched on it that during the pandemic and you had some time on your hands, but I'll phrase it this way. Do you think younger people in this region are interested in vintage? Do you see a whole new influx of like Gen Z and millennial collectors who are like, oh, they're all about vintage? I mean, or were you an anomaly here on this one, that you were like, oh, vintage and neo-vintage?
No, I think a few years ago, vintage, especially vintage Rolex, was definitely much more popular than it is now. I wouldn't say people are flocking towards vintage, because you have to have a certain taste and you have to have a certain knowledge to be able to get into vintage. I think a lot of people want to get into vintage, but they're actually afraid to do so because they're afraid of Franken watches, or afraid of getting a fake watch, or just afraid of getting burnt, really. So like back then, I still had those fears too, but there was a lot of resources online and with social media too, that you could DM a so-called expert in a certain model, especially vintage Rolex. There's a lot of people out there who are experts that you can DM who are actually really, really helpful.
Are there a fair amount of vintage dealers here in Hong Kong?
Yes, there's lots, yeah.
Really?
So historically, Hong Kong has been very, very strong with Rolex. So you might have seen during your stay here that a lot of people are wearing Rolexes, especially vintage Rolex. So even your taxi driver, your bus driver, even your servers around are most likely going to be rocking a vintage Rolex, which happen to be, heirlooms passed down from generation to generation. Because historically, people bought Rolexes as a sign of success, as a sign of wealth, and then they kept it on within the family and passed it down to heirlooms. So there's an abundance of Rolexes here, and even when I got the Uber over here, and the taxi driver was also wearing a Rolex too, So I think
that would never happen in London, by the way.
And also, they're not fake, by the way. A lot of people, take shots and put them online and says, "Oh, my taxi driver is wearing it, or my server is wearing it. It has to be fake." Actually, it's not. I would say it's 90% real, and maybe the 10% might be fake. Yeah.
That's incredible.
So to answer your question, I don't think at the moment Rolex is as popular as indies or as micro brands. I think there's still. Probably it's driven by...
Well, I think my question's more, are you seeing young people like you, good sir, who are just drawn, not just Rolex, but just vintage in general? I'm wearing a vintage Longines.
Yeah.
Like just vintage in general. Are you seeing a greater interest in it now than maybe before?
I think with neo-vintage and vintage as well, because there's a lot more value in there. And the designs then appeal to a lot more people compared to the commercial or hype watches right now. I think the designs were a lot more daring or innovative, like with the Cobra here.
Oh, yeah.
It's 1970s, and James just told me, he was here a second ago, here we go. Good sir, that this Cobra actually was released before the Royal Oak. And I didn't know that. I'm not sure if many people know that. It was released before the Royal Oak, and it was the first integrated integrated bracelet on an AP. So although it's 5403, the reference model number, And this was actually launched first before 5402, which is the first Royal Oak. That's something I learned today. So with these,
I love that you learned that, and I'm so
yeah,
sad
from
that James just
yeah,
left the
yeah,
room.
yeah, he just stepped away. So he gave me
James
this.
had an opportunity to say something, and he didn't take it. I can't believe it.
He'll be back, I'm sure. So these designs now, like it appealed to me even before this particular model was hyped in the last couple of months. Like I bought this 1 year ago when no one was looking at them because it appealed to me because I buy, you know, I hate to sound cliche, but I buy what I like because I enjoy wearing watches,
Sure.
and this particular design appealed to me. And I'd handled a lot of these, and as many people know, integrated bracelets, you can't shorten or lengthen them. You have to cut them,
Sure.
right? You have to find a good goldsmith then who can resolder them and who can then finish it almost like the factory patterns. So when I came across this particular one, it has a very nice tropical dial, which resonates with me, the vintage side, and also it fit me perfectly. So I think it was.
So that actually segues into my next question about that, which is obviously you mentioned Daniel Roth, and you're wearing the watch that you're wearing there. Which one would you say out of your vintage pieces you wear the most, or that's your favorite? You choose either one.
I wear the most Cobra. This is one of my grails, Daniel Roth.
Okay.
The Tourbillon skeleton. Because I've always collected Daniel Roth. At one stage, I had 5 pieces, and when I got this Daniel Roth, then I didn't need the other pieces because this was the holy grail. And a funny story I told Zach yesterday in my interview with him is that not only is this rare, it's skeletonized, and also the serial number is 001. And the funny story is when I purchased this, I asked the dealer, I said, so, what's the serial number? And he goes, there's no serial number. And I said, no, I'm pretty sure the serial numbers. And he looked and I said, it's hidden within these skeleton ones because Daniel Roth then, he outsourced the engravings and he gave, artistic license for the engravers to engrave it in a certain way. So he hid the serial numbers, could be at the front, left, back or side, whatever. So then lo and behold, the next day, the dealer WhatsApped me back and he goes, oh, you learn something new every day.
There
I
you
actually
go.
found it, and it's actually 001. And I thought, when he sent me a photo of it, it looked like 007. So I was like, oh, cool. James Bond.
007, yeah.
I was like, 007, James Bond, too. And he goes,
And
actually,
it's not
no.
an Omega? No way.
Yeah. And then even better, it's actually 001. So
Oh,
it's one of my
wow, that's
favorite
incredible.
watches, yeah.
Sumei, I'm going to ask, and I know this is like asking anybody to pick a favorite child, but since Jackie was able to answer my question, out of all of your magnificent pieces, which again, by the way, just seeing them in pictures, I'm not usually starstruck, and I think I was starstruck at you from your collection. What's the one that you think is your baby, or that you wear the most? That's
That's
question 1A.
That's an
I'm gonna have a
impossible
follow-up.
question to answer, actually. All of them are my babies, and I wear them. Some of them, you rotate and all that.
Yeah.
I do also have vintages. I didn't mention that.
Okay.
When I first got back into watch collecting, I was interested in chronographs. I'd never heard of chronographs before then, so it was like I mixed it up, like most people do, chronometer and chronographs. So anyway, I found out about chronographs, I bought Omegas, and I actually ventured into buying Galleys and Excelsiors, like 1940s, 1950s. They're still in my drawer. I will one day wear them because I find myself reverting back to classical-looking watches, and the vintage ones back in the 1940s, 50s are really, really beautiful.
Oh, incredible.
Sorry.
That's what,
As
no.
an aside.
Listen, I'm a huge fan of vintage myself, so I'm with both of you on that. But Sumei, I want to ask you, for those in Eastern Asia that may not have the means or the connections to be able to acquire, watches of that nature, what I'm saying is like independent watches, similar to the ones that you have, what would be a good piece of advice for somebody who just wants to start their horological journey, who wants to be sitting on this stage 10 years from now or 15 years from now? What would you say to them? If they're in this area, who do they go see? What shops do they visit? What Instagram pages do they follow? What things do they read that have specifically to do with the region that could help them maybe just broaden their horizons on horology?
Actually, there's a plethora of watches which range from a few $100s to hundreds of thousands of dollars in the indie space. And a good place I've seen so far in terms of learning about brands is a blog to watch. If you know Ariel, I don't know him personally, but he does feature lots of watches which I never heard of. Fratello does that. Monochrome does that. So you don't have to go right into buying very expensive independent watches. You can start small. I started apart from the FP Joan, I stopped there for a long while. And when I got back into watch collecting after the Omegas and the Galleys, I started with Ming. He launched a 1701 at $900, a mechanical watch.
I remember.
Closed back, and it took the watch world by storm in a way. And it's simple to get into that monetary threshold to buy watches like this. So you can find quite a lot of independent watches, and of course mainstream watches at a very reasonable price point. And I think most people, if they want to start a watch collection, there is a watch within their means, and then you work your way upwards.
So I think that's another, something else we didn't really touch on, but you just said Ming. And I remember the first show I saw Ming, they had a tiny little table, and they were next to Sartre Ballard, a tiny little table outside of Basel it was called Wine and Time. And it was this tiny little show. And, here are two brands that were selling, I think, $300-400 US it was starting at, and then obviously it's a very different price point now. We referred to Ming as a micro brand at the time, and we referred to Sartre as a micro brand. I don't think any of us would call them a micro brand anymore, but we've talked about independent, we talked about big name Rolex, we talked about vintage in the Asian Pacific market. Are micro brands as big here as they are in the US? Because I just left New York, where there was a massive micro-brand watch fair, a massive watch fair that was happening over there. And it's like, in the US, micro-brands that's what everybody's talking about. I don't see it much. Again, I don't live here, but what do you guys think about that as is this going to be, Southeast Asia's next big thing is micro-brands?
Can I take that?
Yeah, sure.
I think last week, Singapore held an event called I Am Watch by Hourglass. It was mainly focused on independence, but together with, at the same time as that, there was Spring, Sprang, Sprung also. And that fair actually featured a lot of micro brands, if you would call it that.
Yeah.
So both fairs were happening at the same time, and people were switching to and fro, talking to watchmakers and watch founders, because some of these micro brands, they're not typically watchmakers. They buy movements, and then they put the movement in a particular case of a particular design.
Sure.
So we are seeing a lot more micro brands right now. In Singapore, we do have an event which features them, right?
Yeah.
Thanks, Suzanne.
Okay. I like that. Jackie, anything to add on that? And, and again, obviously, Robin, we've referenced him a few times tonight. I've been in 3 different cities in 9 days with Robin. We were in Baltimore together, and then New York, and now we're here in Hong Kong.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
It's incredible,
it's
yeah.
incredible.
I mean,
and then also Toledano and Chan, Alfred is here too. That's one of the most popular releases in recent times. People can't get enough of them, waiting for the next launch. So yeah, like I mentioned, there's that appetite for these micro brands and also Asian-made watches too. Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be Asian-made, but these micro brands offer a lot of value. We just talked about Baltic too, right? They came out with 3 different stone dials. We were just talking about this last night. And so I think because a lot of people can rock or flex, or anyone can buy a certain watch with amount of money, right? But to be able to also rock different genres too, and also a micro brand which is very affordable, it takes a discerning collector to do so, or it takes courage to step in that particular space, especially if you're wearing high-end timepieces or pieces that are typically expensive. To pick up one and to wear it, like the Moon Swatch, right?
Sure.
Is another great example. Okay, not a micro brand, so to speak, but look at the buzz that created, and it's only great for the brand and also great for wrist, for watch collecting in general, and getting watches on your wrist. So yeah, I think micro brands, like I said, is very popular. But one things I would say is that maybe they're starting to become, there's too many of them, and it might not be able to sustain itself, so to speak. You might have an an overflow of these micro brands, and only probably the fittest will survive.
Sure. And to reference Robin again, dude, we're name checking you like crazy right now. But at the watch fair where he was, I said, man, there were so many people there and so many brands. And he looked at me and he went, yeah, probably too many brands.
Yeah.
He said, I spoke to so many people that at the beginning of the day, I'm having to say to people, explain about the brand and give them the whole lovely marketing ploy story. He went, and by the end of the day, I was like, it's a watch, it's made in China. Like, he was so tired of talking about it. But listen, it's probably going to be another year or two. We're not going to refer to him as a micro brand anymore, because that's just not, but you're right, it's like survival of the fittest. Yeah. Hey, and just a shout out, I'm wearing a D1 Milano, this sketch, which literally it's like $200. I get more people stop me
That looks great.
and ask to take a picture of this watch than any other watch that I wear, which is so funny. So yeah, I'm with you on that. Like Moon Swatch, remember when it came out and nobody could get it?
Yeah.
If somebody had it, everybody was like going crazy over it.
Yeah, and then collecting the full set, everything else. Right?
Yeah, it's really funny. All right, well, we're just about ready for Q&A, so I'm going to end it with I mean, you got to know I'm going to ask this question for both of you. What's next on your radar? What do you want next? What's the next thing, your acquisition? We'll start with
go
you,
ahead.
Sumei.
Oh, thanks very
Yes.
much for putting me on the
Because
spot.
you have lots in your
Yes.
pipeline, and I know that.
It's all you, sister.
I'm expecting a Simone Brett.
Whoa!
So
well
the
done.
titanium version, it's taken a long while, but he said he would give it to me in April. I'll put it out there. And I'm looking forward to it because the design is really marvelous. It's one of those, when you look at it, you kind of fall in love with it.
Absolutely.
So that's next on my next coming up.
That's coming.
One of many, right?
I'm not saying.
All right, Jackie, what about you?
For the club, we are in discussion to come up with our first club watch.
Collaborative.
And
Oh,
and it's going
yeah.
to be a micro brand as well. So hopefully we'll have some news for our members next year. And for myself, I'm perhaps looking at another genre, but nothing confirmed whatsoever. I'm also very interested in Chevdet's Minute Earth, right? Sorry
Yeah.
about
Minute
pronunciation.
Energy.
Yeah. But he doesn't seem to answer any of my calls, WhatsApps. But apparently
very bad
he
at
does
that.
that to everyone, right? So fingers crossed, I get
It's funny,
I get one of
Dufour
them.
does the same with me.
Yeah.
Can't get him to get
Yeah.
on the horn.
Well, you want them to be on the bench rather
Yeah,
than responding
exactly,
to,
yeah.
to text
So,
messages. So why not?
So yeah, I'm actually very excited for our club watch more than any personal watches added to my collection, because it's the first watch for our club, so it's going to be pretty meaningful.
So you're
gonna
going to
be
design
great.
it yourself?
Yeah, we're in discussions with the different designs. We're getting a prototype soon to look at, and so yeah, hopefully sometime next year.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, I appreciate, obviously, Sumei, catching up with you and seeing you in person is always lovely. We're 2 minutes early, but I'm going to go ahead and open the floor up for questions. So if anybody has a question for you. James!
We're talking about Asia Pacific, but let's be brutal, it's a pretty big area. So what are the differences in collectors in, say, Japan, China, Hong Kong? Are they different, or are they all?
Well, we have Singapore and Hong Kong on the
I'm thinking about
panel, yeah.
Mainland China and Japan too, which are huge markets.
Yeah, I think Japan is really hidden in the sense of the collectors are like under the radar. You don't see them posting on Instagram, maybe one or two, but they've got a huge collectors market there, and brands which there are quite a lot of independents as well. FP Joan started his first boutique in Japan, so he must have seen the potential in that country. The other one is Thailand. I've recently met a few collectors from Thailand, and I'm like, wow, you've got this. But they don't advertise, they don't post on Instagram. They just go, incognito into watch events, and then you meet them, and then suddenly under their sleeve, they're like, one nice Crevia, for example, unique piece or
Piece
whatever.
unique, yeah.
So
I will tell you, when I went to research Asian watch collector groups, I didn't find, you're on Google going, okay, Singapore watch collector groups and Hong Kong watch, and a bunch are coming up. But yeah, Japan was, I wasn't really getting any hits on that. And I think I did South Korea as well. Like, so there were, I think what Sumei said is correct in that they're not as in your face as, say, maybe the Hong Kong market or the Singapore market.
They never sell.
Yeah.
They never sell. They buy it and just keep
They
it
just buy
and
it.
put it in their safe. They're like you. You just buy your stuff and put it in your safe.
But if you do
You
manage to
told us
get,
last year.
but if you do manage to get a piece from a Japanese collector or dealer, I generally find them to be authentic, very well taken care of, top class.
Yeah. And most likely full set too
Yes,
as well, yeah.
and so, yes, yeah.
Anybody? Ming, okay. Oh, no, ma'am, miss. Oh, sorry.
I thought
No.
Suzanne. Oh, Ming. Suzanne. My. Excuse me.
Hi, thank you so much. Really interesting. I have a question for both of you, but are you members of different collector groups or more than one, and is it okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's lots of members here who are members of a number of watch clubs, and that's absolutely fine. There's no, I definitely don't bar anyone just because they're in a different watch club or anything like that. So yeah, and there's a lot of overlap that our events that we hold, and there's different members from all sorts of clubs that come to ours, and vice versa. So it's absolutely fine.
Yeah, I've never been.
You're a member of a few groups, I think, right?
One formal group and a few informal, and then you have chat groups as well. Zoe is one of them. She's got lots of collectors in there. Then I've got a small group from Singapore called A Chat to Watch. Yeah. So, excuse me, lots of groups members of. Excuse me. Always happens to me when it comes to events. Last year, I lost my voice at Dubai Watch Week for 1 week, right?
Literally a week. You were like, nice to meet you. Suzanne, you had a question?
Great chat. Thanks to, props to everyone on the stage. This is a question for both of you. Sumei, I hope you really have a sip of water. I was just wondering, both of you personally, as people who enjoy and appreciate and, take great care in selecting what watch you're going to buy next, what is the longest period of time that you would accept for in terms of waiting list? Or what's the longest that you have accepted before? And does that help you set the boundary for...
Jack, you want to go
Yeah,
first?
I'll
while
go
she
first.
clears it?
The longest I've waited on a wait list was about 2 years. It was for my first debatoon. Yeah, 2 years, and I don't think I would wait more than 2 years. Obviously, if someone says 2 years and there's delays in between, I think pushing it max 3 years for me. Like we had dinner with Kari the other night when we were in Singapore, right? And his wait lists are like 7 or 8 years.
I would wait for Kari.
Yeah, what's gonna? No one knows what's gonna happen. Like even for tomorrow, let alone 8 years, right? And then you're putting 20 or 30% of your money towards that. Unless you really, really like Carrie, for me, max 2 to 3 years, I would wait. Yeah.
I waited 2 years for my Roman Gautier C6, and I bought it sight unseen, so it just got delivered to me recently. That was like long, but I would wait a whole heck of a long time if it was a watchmaker. If it were a watchmaker I really admired and I wanted to watch, even though, but I don't know about 10 years.
So you would
I would wait long.
10 years, yeah.
Yeah, maybe 8 years.
Wow.
I would go up to that time, yeah.
If it was Carrie, you'd wait 8 years.
Well, his waiting list is 7 years now. I'm hoping to get it in 3
Okay.
years or something. But if I didn't have a Kari watch, I would wait.
7 years.
Wow.
I would wait.
That's passion.
Good question. Young man in the green shirt right there.
Hi, Barbara. For Jackie and Sumei, congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
So I have a question for Sumei. You went into indies very deep. So many young watch guys, I'm 31, but our age group is like 25, 20 to down to 35, 40. They want to get into like independence. Do you have any advice for those who want to start getting into the indies? without getting burned at the same time, because they hate waiting.
So-
They're part of that culture that is like instant, where it's not like me, like an old school. Like I learned to wait for things, great things, but they're like, I'm willing to go gray market just to get my indie. So maybe what's your advice for them? Thank you.
Sell a kidney, right? Is that what, like sell a kidney? I mean, so that's,
Well, I mean,
happens pretty fast.
if you're paying a huge premium, you're just encouraging people to flip watches and charge more. I would actually, suggest that you reach out to whichever brand and try and find out what their time frame is and get on their waiting list. Because the more you wait and pay premium for watches, unless they are watches which have been produced a long time ago and you can't get them now, my suggestion is to just be patient and wait, because you will find something. It might not be what you think you would want initially, but if you look around, there are many, many, many watches available, and I think to suit many, many different tastes. And then you just go upwards from there. Oh, well, maybe laterally, whatever. But from there, you start appreciating what each watch can offer as well, because not all watches offer the same thing. Hopefully that answers your question.
Jackie, do you, I don't think we told her, do you have any traditional indie, like an Urwerk or an MB&F? Do you own any of the indie
Yeah,
brands?
I have a FP Journe and also a
Journe. You did
Debatoon
mention
too.
that,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely, yeah.
I didn't buy this from Watchbox.
Yeah.
Hourglass.
In the back, gentleman in
Yeah.
the back,
Yeah.
waving frantically.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. Constant, yeah.
Hey guys. Hi.
Hi,
Hi.
Constant.
How are you?
Great.
So it's more like a personal question because I don't really know what to ask, to be honest. I just want to say hi. But anyway, maybe
You could've just
We go
waved.
for
Hi.
we just
would've
brought you
seen
out for
you.
a drink last night.
Yeah. Anyway, I think maybe I'll ask both of you, since you guys are really big into independence, great independent collectors, by the way. I know all of the watches that you guys have. Maybe a little bit less on Sumei, but so maybe on the independent brands, share some of your, let's say, most personal moments, I think, with some of these independent watchmakers. Firstly, share which brand to you is the most special, and why.
Okay, I'll go ahead. So I talked about Daniel Roth, but my next, this is my first independent. A Debatoon was my second one. And to answer your question, the personal moment was when Jorg and Pierre, so Jorg is the international sales director for Debatoon and Pierre is the CEO. They came to Hong Kong last year, I remember. And every time they were here, they would stay on this side of the island, so they'd never go over to the Kowloon side, right? And I live over that side, so I brought them over. So I brought them over to a very traditional dim sum place, and where there's still pushing the carts, the local people who would know here. Very traditional, and not many of them left. And my family were there that day, so my mom, my granny, my sister, my brother-in-law, and their 2 kids were there too. And we all sat around the table and everything, and they got to meet them. And they got to meet my granny before she passed too as well, So I think that was a really, really nice moment for them to see the people behind the watches that I love, because they obviously don't really understand why I love this particular watch or wristwatches in general. And I spend so much time organizing events and chatting with people. And so, yeah, that was a very touching moment for me, especially when my granny passed too. I posted a lot of stories about her when she passed, and one of them was a photo of all of us there that day, having dim sum, and Jorg, Pierre, and also another member of the Debatoon team there. So yeah, that's one of the memories that I'll never forget. Yeah.
Sumei, what about you? I know you just did that, like you mentioned, the journey in Switzerland through the manufacturers, but what moment or memory sticks out?
This happened during Watches and Wonders this year. I love Kari Voutilainen's watches. I've been queuing for his watch for a long time. And during Watches and Wonders week, I went to HCI in Icebergs, and he had his To Be On anniversary. He had his Inverse 2 and a gem set watch. And everyone was gravitating towards these 3 watches. And he had one Von 3 or Von 8 at the back. No one touched it. My partner looked at it and said, "May I see that watch?" I took it out. I'm like, wow, this is beautiful. I asked Kari, "Is this for sale?" He looked at me. He said, "For you?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Yes." I'm like, oh, you know, this is like shortcut process. Kari, don't kill me, please. And I said, how much was it? How much is it? He says, XX price. I'm like, okay, I got to think about it. Can I get back to you in 12 hours? I thought about it very quickly, and I texted him back, and I said, yes, I'll get it. But you know what? What that made me realize?
And so you're down a kidney, is what you're saying. So I told you, it works.
No,
It's quick.
I don't have any sense of design. You know, Kari allows you to customize your watch. I went through so many iterations of renderings, and I'm thinking, I really don't know what I want. But that watch was perfect. So I think leave the customization of designs to people who are experts at it, because they have a good balance, they have a good eye, they know what fits. And sorry, my long story short, that was quite a memorable time for me.
Wow, that's good.
Thank
Good
you.
question.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any other questions for these 2 fine collectors? I think we have. Oh, hello, Michael.
Just to add to the gentleman's question on impatient young collectors, don't be afraid to contact the indies directly, especially if you're looking for certain pieces, because mostly the indies will know where their pieces are in the world. And sometimes they know that you are looking and can source for you. So if you are a bit impatient, contact them directly and they can source.
So what he's
good
saying
advice.
is, if you want a Fiona Kruger, talk to him. He's your guy.
It is true, though, that indie watchmakers or watch brands are the easiest to reach out to. And if they don't have the watch in question, they will point you to someone whom you can source from. So that's great advice.
And also, they might know one of their clients or collectors that might want to part with it.
Sure.
To trade in for another piece, so they can put you in touch with the seller directly.
Or join one of those watch chat groups. There are many around. You can always post a picture of the watch you want and then ask looking for, and then maybe you're lucky, someone will want to sell it to you. So that's quite a good forum as well.
Fantastic. Okay.
Gerald,
Young man.
Gerald there?
So thank you for sharing your experiences in your watch journey. So I have a question about, so right now, everyone's into independence. But now the big boys are in, the LVMH, Chanel, Hermes, they're really dipping their hands into high horology. So how do you think that would affect the watch game for the whole world now?
LVMH specifically? LVMH specifically? So they relaunched Daniel Roth, also Gerald Genta too, but the first 2 Daniel Roths that they relaunched were tourbillons, and the first one was a subscription and it was sold out instantly. The second one too, I think, is limited production, but obviously quite an expensive price. I think €140. Don't quote me on that, but not that very affordable. So I spoke to Jean Arnaud last week when he was in IM Watch. The next one they are coming out with is going to be more affordable. It's going to be a time-only one. So I think in that sense it's great for the brand, for Daniel Roth overall, the reissue pieces and also the older pieces too. So, and also it's the same with Genta too. It brings Genta into the fore. More people are talking about it, more people are posting about it on Instagram, and that can only be good for the brand in general. How it impacts the market, I think it's only good. More options, the better. But as long as they're coming out with good pieces that are affordable, and I think LVMH are very, very serious about this, right? Because they're buying lots of other companies, subsidiaries, and also now they're the sponsor for F1 now, if I believe, right, as well. So, you know, they're in this for the long game. So I think it can only be a positive for the watch market or watch collecting in general.
Yeah, I agree with that. Especially mainstream brands, because they have their own set of collectors, if they do launch something which is different and which is more, I wouldn't call it independent-based, but somewhat similar to what LVMH is doing, it can only attract their buyers or their clientele to a different genre, and maybe they, move on to, I wouldn't say move on, but they move towards the typical or the normal independent brands and not the mainstream brands. It's good.
We
for the
have time
market.
for maybe one
Yeah.
last question. My dear Karishma.
Very inspiring stories. To follow up to that question, we're talking a lot about independent brands right now, but we're also seeing a lot of collaborations in the industry with the mainstream brands and independent brands. So are those watches that also interest you?
If you're talking about the LV Acrevia, well, it's
Or the studio.
500,000. Yeah, studio. But they're all expensive, I feel. They are priced not for...
You have a kidney left?
Yeah.
Come on.
They're not priced
feel like I'm
for
at one.
normal collectors, I feel. So you do see a lot of collaborations, but especially with the mainstream and indies, but I find those a bit expensive. Maybe that's an understatement or overstatement, depending on how you
Yeah,
look at
I
it.
agree. They're not particularly affordable. They're not particularly accessible. So I think the interest straight away dies down once you know that, number one, you most likely can't afford it, and even if you could, they're out of reach because they're going to be sold to their own VIP clients already. So there's interest in it. There's interest in any type of watches. But for me personally, as long as design, price, the brand, all these elements, if they resonate with me, they appeal to me, then I'm interested in it for sure.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if we saw more of the reverse, a la the Moon Swatch?
Yeah.
Where you took obviously under the same umbrella, but where you took the more expensive brand and the cheap brand and actually made it more accessible to somebody who would want an Omega that maybe couldn't afford an Omega. You're right, we're kind of seeing the opposite where you're getting like the bigger brands or the indie watchmakers and then the little micro brands, and it's kind
It's
of
other
gone
way
the opposite
around,
way.
yeah, yeah.
So
But very good question.
that's a great question. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dubai Watch Week, for having me again.
Thank you.
Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you, Siddiqui family.
Thank you.